Hello, good morning, and welcome to Digital's inaugural Marketing Technology Summit. I'm Mark Stephen. If you're going to be tweeting about anything today, can you remember to include the hashtag Marketing Tech Summit, Marketing Tech Summit, please. Obviously, this is a virtual event, so we've transferred as much of the value as we can from the physical events into this virtual environment. We've got presentations, discussions, and networking via live chat facilities. We've got a range of solution providers from across the supply chain in the exhibition area. These events are only really possible due to the support of the sponsors. So if you can, please take the time to actually visit the stands and engage with them. There are a number of competitions and prizes on offer in the exhibition area with a leaderboard to reward interaction and participation. If you click on the leaderboard icon at the top of any page to find out more. Some exhibitors, sneaky devils, are also giving away prizes at their booths, including free passes to Digital Day and a pair of Apple AirPods Pro. Take time to explore the platform. It's actually quite complex. Well, not complex. It's quite rich in what it has to offer. You can engage with the sponsors and make the time to chat with your peers throughout the day. We've introduced a new live video chat function, which should allow you to have real-time face-to-face conversations. So just click on the chat icon to begin. There are also 2 themed group chats in the networking lounge you can join, as well as a general networking chat room. The conference sessions are going to be run through a series of webinars. So to access the sessions, just navigate to the auditorium page and click the session you wish to attend, or select the hyperlink in the pop-up boxes, which appears immediately before the main sessions. Now, that's basically the intimations done and dusted. We're going to go straight into session 1 now. Over the last decade, the marketing function has been completely redefined, driven by digital transformation and an explosion of new tools and technologies. This opening session aims to contextualize that change and consider what it means for businesses. Our first speaker is Peter Proud, who's Chief Executive Officer of Forrit, talking about the art and science of marketing transformation. But basically, what he wants to explore is the shift in expectations and customer engagement. So, Peter, across to you.
Thanks very much, Mark. Never did I think that our market manager would come up and ask us to buy branded face masks. But because we're all remote, I'm not going to need that. So buying 600 branded masks was never something I ever thought I would do in my varied career. Thanks everyone for attending. Yes, we formed Forrit in 2014. We decided to do it on the 2nd of April because we were supposed to start on the 1st of April, and I thought it'd be bad luck. The 2nd of April was unlucky as well because I actually broke my arm on the morning of going to the first meetings. So yeah, we should have just went for the first. Today I'm going to talk about the art and science of marketing transformation, and I'm going to talk about how we changed marketing in Unilever and how we changed marketing in Microsoft while I worked for Microsoft, and then talk about how we formed our company and why. This first slide, Ray Bug was laughing at me for using it, but this meeting was done in 2006 in Seattle, and there's only a couple of Microsoft employees there. In the middle is Gates. I'm at the back in the pink shirt because my job was just to get everyone together. But the CIO of Unilever asked me to put together a meeting with the marketing department. And in those days, IT and marketing never ever spoke to each other. And I put on a day and a half session talking about the connected consumer in 2008. And on that, and in that meeting, we changed, and we got a quote from the CTO. It changed the way that the Unilever thought and did digital marketing. So we did things like run the Dove Women campaign on MSN. The target audience was affluent non-working women. For that advert, affluent non-working women actually used the web mainly between 9:30 and 11:30. So we followed the sun from Sydney to Seattle, running the TV advert before it was shown on TV, and then we actually put a survey behind it. whereby we collected 180,000 surveys in 3 days, and the result was the TV advert was changed. We started building in vending machines in games like Zoo Tycoon, whereby you could get a voucher to get Magnum ice creams. And it was kind of weird. We did about 40 million of incremental revenue with Unilever from stuff that we already had, but we never ever thought about. And which is a lot, right? I mean, 40 million of incremental business in anyone's terms is a huge amount of money. We ended up hosting Dove.com, Lynx, Axe, Magnum on our web properties, and so I got pulled out my job and was told to start the One Microsoft initiative, whereby we were to land that across the top 100 clients in Microsoft. So what I did, which is actually quite hard to do, I got 89 product teams from Microsoft in a room in Seattle. I worked out in Seattle at the time, and we gave them 4 slides: what your product did, how you monetized it, who your target audience was, and where you fitted in the Microsoft strategy. And the next few slides is kind of what we come up with. So we ended up building a concept of a solution that ultimately I couldn't get Microsoft to build. So I built it myself. So the first kind of thing we said is, look, life used to be easy. It used to be about banners and search, get people to your website. But then, the consumer changed. Things started to get a bit more complicated, many different channels. And in these days, IT and marketing didn't really work together cohesively, and then, you had to think about things being integrated. So, there was this kind of divide of, IT and marketing, and how did you start to bring them all together across all of the different touch points? And this is an old slide to give you an idea of how advanced our kind of thinking was at the time. And I'm using these slides now. We actually did these slides in about 2007. So these slides are 13 years old. So we were, really quite advanced at the time in our thinking. But I wanted to use them again to kind of show you where the journey started and give you an idea of where that transformation ended with regards to us ultimately building a massive marketing stack. So there's lots of different touch points as marketeers you've got to think about, and then every market is different. So if you're doing a global brand, you've got lots of different touch points, you've got lots of different devices, but you've also got lots of different properties and systems that people are using. So what we started to kind of realize was this was very, very complicated. It wasn't just about the kind of old marketing model, where it was about kind of you put together a strategy, you started to put together the kind of media and the creativity round about campaigns. What people had to really think about was the analytics and technology as well. And we found, certainly I found, because I came more from the analytics and technology side, and we just bought a company called Razorfish, which was a digital agency. And, they spoke Klingon, and I came from Zorg. And we didn't really kind of, we spoke very different languages. And that's what we saw inside our clients as well. The IT departments were all about, resilience, security, process, and the marketing departments were speed and get things out there, and to bring the two worlds together to start to run in a digital world. It can get very, very complicated. I was lucky enough a couple of years ago in the Web Summit to have a meeting with Sir Tim Berners-Lee, and we had a good chat about the internet and his view on it. And ultimately, I was able to bring some of the work that he's doing just now about making the internet a safer place, and get Scottish Government to kind of sign up to it. Because if you speak to him, he says that the good and the bad that this technology has brought to the world, he views as equal, and he wants to make it more good. So when it comes to kind of the way that you deliver digital at speed, at scale, there's a whole new raft of skills required. So what did we come up with And the way we started to kind of talk about the world was, we called it perfect marketing. It was all about how to make something that was super complicated very simple. And the definition we put together was, we wanted to get it so that there was nothing else to strip away. How could we take something that was massive? So to give you an idea of what we ended up with, our platform did the launch for Windows 10 and Surface for Microsoft. So when the CEO of Microsoft stood up on stage to 600 journalists to do a global launch for the new products, which are pretty significant products in the Microsoft environment of Windows 10 and Surface, we switched the websites on while he was on stage. Took about 3 seconds to propagate globally, and we took 120 million hits on the first day. So that's what we've ended up with. So we've got a very secure, scalable, robust, agile marketing stack, all cloud-based, crowd-driven, super secure, etc. And we're not going to talk about that today, right? This isn't about talking about what we've got, more the process and the transformation that we got there. So step one was we took some clients, we heard their pain, we started to try things out with them. They really resonated with the clients. We got bigger clients, so we ended up running things like the market stacks for Procter & Gamble. We ended up doing all the analytics and data for eBay and American Express and the such, like, all in the back of these meetings. And we ended up building a division inside Microsoft called One Microsoft that actually we ultimately turned over $1 billion without any new products, just actually leveraging what we already had, and we started to get more and more into the marketing side of things. So at the time, Gates still worked for us. He did this tour session on the connected consumer, and we said, right, how do we start to smash the two worlds together? The new technologist and the new marketeer. And this was before we even saw any job titles like Chief Digital Officer. So we were pre the Chief Digital Officer era in this stage. So what we started to define as part of this meeting was what issues does this create for global? It doesn't have to be global organizations. It's just organizations, but large organizations. And the first was the decline in media effectiveness from the increasing number of channels. When I was a kid, I think I remember watching snooker on a black and white TV. When I was young, and if you wanted to get your new product out to market, it is quite funny when they used to actually describe, yes, it is about to hit the brown ball, and that was for people like us who still had black and white tellies. But if you wanted to do a launch or a new product, when I was a kid, 18 million people would see that you had a new chocolate bar if you chucked it on when Coronation Street was on at 7:30 on a Wednesday. But now the way that people consume and use media is very different. Customers' expectations are high. If you've got a kind of slow, latent website, if somebody waits more than 5-6 seconds to actually see what they're looking for, then they're gone. So, you as a marketing department have got to make sure you're working in conjunction with the technology departments to actually make sure you've got the right information to the right place at the right time, at speed, at scale. Customers don't differentiate between channels. I don't care if I'm on my phone, my PC, I don't care, right? So you've got to make sure that you've got the right information to the right place at the right time in the right way, all in a secure, scalable, robust, managed way, where you can actually get the analytics and the data back from what's been done. And the last thing is you can't control the consumer. So people can say whatever they want about your brand anywhere at any time. There's no recourse on it. We're seeing it now more than anything with some of the trolling that's going on, which is, frankly, pretty disgusting. But, people seem to think they can say what they like. But when it comes to about your brand, all you can do is you can read and hear what they say and actually try and counter it. So a good example was a new drug for diabetes was launched, and one of the kind of major bloggers in the diabetic community started kind of slagging off the new drug because it was making them fat. And so the company that made the drug actually saw his influence and actually engaged him and got him a nutritionist. And it was actually his diet that was wrong, not the drug. And so they got him a nutritionist, and actually he was converted to be very vocal and being very positive. So it's all about, an example I had was, I got on a flight to London to fly to New York. I used to work in the States, but I still lived in Fife. So I used to commute to the States. So it'd be 2 weeks here, 2 weeks there. And I got on my plane to fly to London to get a connecting flight. And just as I was getting on the plane, I got a message saying that that my flight had been cancelled and I had to get there. So I put on Twitter at British Airways, this isn't acceptable, blah, blah, blah. Put in my gold card number and gave them a hard time on Twitter. And when I landed in London, there was somebody waiting off the plane for me from British Airways with all the stuff and an apology, and whiffed me onto another plane on another airline. So I actually made my meeting. So, social media, it's important that people listen to what people are saying, because you can't control what people say about you, but what you can do is you can listen and you can react, and you can actually, appease and actually get the right messaging about your brand. The next thing we came up with was being an effective organization. So, we were working with companies. So Unilever had 420 agencies, and we put together a project called Project Greenhouse, and that took it from 420 to 50. So, if you look at the way that brands have exploded inside organizations, it's all been kind of broken up and fragmented, different agencies, different countries, different brands. If you're the kind of CMO sitting across all of that, how do you start to centralize and get good views of analytics and data across all of those properties? And then, that's expanded out by the fact that we are a global organization. So how do you, make sure that you've got your brand right place? I always think it's funny being Scottish that Microsoft called their search engine Bing, because coming from Fife, a Bing is a kind of scrap heap. But it's all about, we live in a global world, but it's very local now. So how do you actually get your message across? And it's not enough just to translate what you've got, right? It's because things can be taken out of context. So how do you make sure that you've got proper transcreation delivered across all of your marketing properties and getting the right message, right place, right time, especially when you're in heavily regulated organizations like pharmaceuticals or finance? It's not just enough to kind of say the right thing, but the intent has got to be right as well. And then the efficiencies on the kind of advertising media supply chain. So, it's all about kind of film once, use everywhere, shoot once, use everywhere, use the same assets across all different properties. And the way that we've done that is, we've got some kind of cropping tools and stuff in our technology. So you have a big, massive image, and then that can then be shrunk down and used properly across, PC, film, TV, outdoor, mobile, whatever device. And the last piece is the kind of left-hand side of the brain meets the right-hand side of the brain. So start to pull together the creative marketing with the data analytics and tech people, and start to pull that together in a cohesive way. A good example, we did the data analytics for eBay very early on when it came to A/B and multivariate testing, and we had 6 properties on the website that we kind of had 4 different images. So that gave kind of 4 to the 6 to the power of 4 was 4,096 different iterations. So we were able to kind of use cookies and use search data to actually start to read and say, right, this person's actually a big buyer on eBay, but it's not a big seller. To kind of get people to work properly on eBay, you need buyers and sellers. So let's actually market to him that he should actually start to sell more rather than just buy. And it was all about using analytics and data. So that's kind of what we thought about with regards to a platform. So we from there we start to say, right, this is what we think's needed. So let's build a platform. I don't know if he's been retired a few years, but we used to work for this guy. He was pretty interesting character. His name is Balmer, and so you'll see the kind of what we put together, and he wanted to simplify it, and he grabbed a notebook and said, right, is this what you're trying to build? So what we came up with was a 5-tier stack, and so it's pretty busy slide, sorry, but I kind of wanted to kind of give you the data. But basically, to make it kind of more explanatory when you get the slides, we said that it had to be a cloud-based solution. that gave you resilience, speed, and scale. Multi-tenancy needed to be built in to the core, so you needed to be able to kind of configure it so you had no noisy neighbors. It had to be fast, cheap, inexpensive way to build it. So you had to kind of have like a plethora of skills out there that was easy to access. It had to be multi-channel, multilingual. It had to be easy to localize, and it had to be easy to integrate third-party services. And then the last piece was data and analytics and SEO had to be all integrated into the solution. So this took us 2 years to get to this point, pulling everything together, working out how to do it. And then finally, this is what we came up with as part of that, listening to lots of customers, getting lots of customer experience. And we came up with the idea of a 5-tier architecture where we had an infrastructure layer, a services layer, a data layer, content management, content creation layer, and then a distribution channel so you could actually share that out. So, I wanted to talk about the kind of process that I went through from an initial meeting in 2006 to sitting here in the world of hopefully near the end of COVID in 2021, whereby we've been on a 15-year journey of coming up with an idea of an enterprise stack for delivering marketing at speed, at scale. We have pretty large clients. We run Microsoft websites in 60 countries. We run TescoBank.com. We run Lloyd's of London. We're just finalising the paperwork to take over Motorola. So we're just starting. I mean, this is us coming out of 6 years of development and building a CMS in Edinburgh. So that, Mark, that's what I wanted to kind of cover off was, what we've gone through as a journey was we got a lot of clients together. They shared with us their problems. They struggled with at speed, at scale, secure digital delivery that they could go and take the analytics and data from and help with their decisioning. So thanks everyone for listening. This is a very strange way to present, sitting in a room on your own. Everybody could be asleep for all I know. But thanks very much for your time, and I'll pass over to Mark.
Peter, thank you very much for that. I'm sure everybody is not asleep. There's actually a comment coming already from David McKenna from AdaWorks. Really likes your Scottish background, he says. Very nice artwork in the background there. So we've all been admiring that artwork in the background. If you get any questions for Peter, or indeed any of our speakers so far, use the question box down at the bottom of your screen, and we'll relay those questions to them when we actually get to the end of the first 3 speakers. Our next speaker is Vivian McLaren, Head of Marketing at IdeaGen and a Fellow of the Chartered Institute of Marketing. Again, what Vivian wants to explore here is, why many organizations are still failing to use digital marketing properly. So Vivian, over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here, and it's wonderful to actually be not wearing leisure wear, at least from the waist up. As Mark said, Head of Marketing at IdeaGen, a Fellow of the CIM, and also seen at lots of women's football over the past few years. Let's hope that we actually get some sport played soon. Anyway, I just wanted to talk today about a passion of mine, which is really my career with digital marketing. And in the last couple of years of my first role straight out of uni at Scottish Power, I became pretty captivated by it as a channel. I think predominantly because I was amazed that everything could be measured, and I couldn't understand why you can't measure exactly how many people see a billboard or listen to a radio ad, for example. So I became pretty interested in that area. I knew that I wanted to work in digital marketing, and luckily enough for me, there was an organisation called Scotland Online, which was, a pure play digital organisation. It was a joint venture between DC Thomson and Thus at the time, and I got a role in there in 2000. And at that point, it spawned one of the first ever recruitment sites and various other excellent pieces of kit and publishing. So in the year 2000, I joined Scotland Online, and people said to me, why are you working in online? That's never going to take off. That is just, why are you doing that? And I think perhaps they might have read this piece, which appeared in the newspaper December 2000. Maybe just a passing fad. So, I stuck to my guns and my career. I've been really lucky to have worked with many kind of client and agency side organisations, but to cut my teeth at places like Scotland Online, one of the best digital agencies to come out of Scotland, Dow Carter in those days, and also including Storm ID and others. So captivated by digital. 20 years ago was, when I really had my first pure play digital role. And yet in 2021, we're still talking about businesses harnessing digital. And I find it quite astounding that we're still having these conversations. So I just want to take you through, some of the numbers, some of my thoughts, and maybe some of the barriers that are holding people back. And then from my day job perspective, during COVID, how we've actually had to really accelerate our flip to real digital investment and really accelerating that. So right now, 60%, 65% of the world population use the internet on a daily basis. So in 2000, when I got my first job, it was 5.9%. So I can see why people were maybe a bit dubious. That population, let's be clear, includes business owners as well as consumers. You're a consumer when you go home at night or when you leave your office to go onto your couch. 83.4 businesses of all businesses in the UK have a website. That's great. But it doesn't mean they have any form of digital strategy. And working in the agency days, the amount of clients that we would inherit, we would win from other agencies where they spent so much money building a site, I couldn't understand why they weren't getting traffic. And it was basic things like, the site wasn't indexed, for example. So, there's a whole range of issues out there that a lot of businesses still don't understand. Even larger organizations, in my experience, still don't use digital channels effectively, and in some environments, it's the smaller businesses that are leading the way. And I think we've seen this especially during lockdown. I've seen a lot of local businesses really harnessing their digital presence and the social media, implementing e-commerce, to implement click and collect, etc. So in saying that, I looked at a survey 2019 on e-commerce startups. So that's pure e-commerce, and 90% of the startups are set to fail within the first 120 days, which I find astonishing. Like, who's investing in these startups if they don't have clear plans and focuses to drive the business forward? And one of the key reasons is failing to deliver in online marketing. And for e-commerce, direct response is oxygen. If you don't have direct response ads driving traffic to your sites to buy, you've got no customers. And the second most common reason is the lack of online search visibility. Again, something in the digital marketing toolbox that is really bread and butter for any site. So, no matter what size the business is and what budgets are, if the talent's not there, the success just isn't easy. We even look at FTSE 100, corporate brands. Marketing Week looked at this in 2015, and it came back to say that corporate brands are digitally immature. In 2019, it had improved, but the overall standard remains mediocre. I just find it astonishing when a lot of large organisations have huge budgets to invest and seem to not be investing them in the right places. If we look at the digital census in 2020, it looked at 49% of FTSE 100 businesses are missing the chance to capitalise in search marketing as part of their wider strategy. Search marketing, is something, I think it's something like 7 billion of all spend in the UK. So if you're not capitalising on it, then there's serious problems. The IAB produce wonderful stat packs every month, every quarter. And when I first started out, I used to dream of the day that digital spend would outstrip TV. That line used to digital was always at the bottom, and we see now that it's increased to 68% of all media, and that was the first half of 2020. and it's still managed to hold for the rest of the year, down slightly, I think, overall, but really, really strong stats. So we're spending in digital. So why are things not as effective in many areas? And I think I've mentioned, talent, lack of, a cohesive strategy. Having a digital marketing strategy, it underpins every other aspect of your marketing strategy. Understanding within organizations, perhaps there are people in there that actually don't understand or don't have the experience. You don't need huge budgets to be successful in digital, and that's why I love it. So at IdeaGen, I just want to touch on a couple of learnings that we have really come to realize since lockdown in particular, and how digital has been really a huge growth area for us, since I joined over the past few years, in terms of what it's actually delivering to the overall business plan. So just to give you just a quick flavour, we basically sell regulatory and compliance software platforms. So we have huge niche audiences, niche personas, from life science and healthcare, accounting, finance, aviation, aerospace, defence. So you've got very, very niche pockets of targets in a global market. So events had been a big part of that in the past. So you would send some of our specialists, around the world to go to key audit events, etc., aviation events, where they're engaging with their prospects. Obviously, COVID hit, these things started to be cancelled. So how did we flip that round, and how did we use digital aggressively to try and fill that gap? As an organisation, our mindset, we're very much an innovative organisation. We have grown significantly over the past few years, and we've had 10 years of consistent growth, and we have around about 6,000 clients now, which is great. As I mentioned there, we've got 6,000 companies using our product portfolio, which is wonderful. But when you actually drill into that, and as I said earlier, the niche audiences, that's a challenge, because we need to make sure that we are delivering the right content to the right people to actually, get them interested in our story, in our products, and what our products can actually deliver. And then you've got that global market that we need to be competing in. We've got 12 global operational sites. I'm in one in Glasgow at the moment. We've got now well over 500 employees, and as I said, 6,000 customers. So from our perspective, our digital marketing toolbox is really, pretty straightforward, I think. Search engine marketing, paid search, organic search, hugely important. Paid advertising, PPC, display, programmatic, retargeting, and social. And again, underpinning every single campaign that we actually run is good quality content and very targeted content. We utilize mainly LinkedIn and Twitter. And then within the content marketing framework, as I've said, they're really looking to nurture different user intents, different personas, different audiences. Thought leadership I've highlighted here because everyone on this, watching this right now, you're all experts in what you do, and sometimes you forget that. And I think in organizations where you have a wide range of specialists working across different sectors and bits of software, we need to really amplify the expertise that we have in this organization, and that's been a key facet of our content strategy. Email is still something that we use. We use Pardot marketing automation tool, and we use Salesforce because we have a very, very tight process where we can actually look at the date and time that a lead was generated from marketing sources. We can see it going through Salesforce. We can see it being allocated to a salesperson, and we can see it at the stage as it's heading towards a close won deal. And we can also look at the value of that deal and then map that back to our marketing attribution. What channels are delivering the most leads? What channels are delivering the highest conversion rates? We're constantly looking at that. And also web experience. So, user experience, personalization. You know, we use a couple of personalization tools so that if you are browsing on our site, something you know, related to a product that you're looking for example, our Q-Pulse product, if you then come back, we've built up a picture, it will then serve you relevant content so that you don't have to then go through and navigate that all back. Conversion rate optimization, you know, again, what's the point in driving traffic to a site if it's not going to convert? It's something that we look at all the time, and we carry out multivariate testing on a regular basis. And as I said, you know, analytics and measurement, hugely important part of what we do. So shifting the mindset, you know, looking at the past couple of years, the digital channels and the contribution that they're making to our new business sales pipeline and the delivery of what we call marketing qualified leads. So we have certain criteria on our site. When they complete our Pardot forms on there to request a demo, for example, that becomes a marketing qualified lead. It gets pushed into our systems, and that is basically building our sales pipeline. So that's grown to 85%, which is phenomenal. And as a result, our performance marketing budget has increased fivefold for next financial year. Our digital team has grown eightfold, moving on from a more operationally led approach. And then, as I said, all activity is measured real time via our core tools of, you know, Pardot and Salesforce are key. You know, so we've got dashboards relating to every industry, every vertical, and every global territory to really have a bit of a barometer of how we're getting on. COVID kicked in, obviously, and you know, our financial year starts 1st of May, so timing wise, it wasn't ideal. So we were looking at, okay, first 6 months of the financial year, how is this going to go? You know, we looked at some of our analysis tools to look at what demand was out there in terms of search intent from a paid perspective, organic searches, really looking at all the kind of analytics that we had access to try and give our sales teams a bit of an idea of where we could see things picking up and where we could see things dropping off. So that's kind of underpinned our strategy. You know, our events calendar was cancelled, so you know, we replaced that with our own kind of digital targeted kind of hub events, and utilised our prospect database for that. We also rebranded the entire business, and that was fairly challenging, but we managed to do that in the first half of the financial year as well. As I talked about, optimizing our sites, you know, driving people into the very important tailored journeys when they're looking for any of our solutions and products. You know, it's very, very important that when we're targeting and engaging with these people, whether it's on LinkedIn, whether it's on paid search channels or display, or even content thought leadership pieces, or any of our audit podcasts, for example, that when they click through, they're actually getting an experience based on what it is they're looking for. And that's something that's a really, really important focus for us. Landing pages are absolutely huge. You know, that is where, you know, we're pushing people, you know, through that funnel to try and get them to become that MQL. Just taking you through examples of some of the channels that I've mentioned. You know, paid advertising, most people are aware of what that is, and then display advertising as well. Now, you know, having worked in B2C and B2B, people, you know, kind of say, oh, B2B is really not that exciting. I have to say that in my career, this is one of the most interesting roles that I've had in B2B. And if you'd asked me 10 years ago if I would ever say that, I'd probably have said no. But it truly is. It's challenging and insightful every single day. So we've also got LinkedIn. And again, LinkedIn as a channel is really superb. You know, we've got some audiences where there's a universe of maybe 200 key organizations in a certain territory. We can load all of that information within LinkedIn and actually push out really targeted, informative messages just to those individuals on LinkedIn. And again, it's not a hard sell. It's here's something that's actually interesting and might add value to your role and what you're doing. And we really do focus on thought leadership and content that's actually going to be beneficial to the user, and I touch on that just shortly. Again, you know, social platforms, LinkedIn and Twitter primarily. So we've got our organic posts where we have content plans for that. And then we have some of our kind of paid posts as well, and that just gives you an idea of what we're actually doing. Content, I mentioned earlier, content underpins really the whole marketing strategy, of which digital is a massive, massive part of that. And, the main objectives for us, drive and improve the quality of MQLs, because as anyone who works in this industry knows, you can usually switch on the volume, but it's the quality that's extremely important. So we've actually, spent a lot of time, especially during the first half of our financial year, looking at areas in the globe that just aren't delivering quality leads, and just cutting back on our spend in those areas and redeploying elsewhere. Generating lead capture information, so that we're actually gathering information each time people are engaging with our pieces of content, and increasing our reach and share of voice across our channels. And that ties in very closely with our PR department, who will monitor our share of voice globally. And as I said earlier, thought leaders, we want to be thought leaders. You're all experts in what you do. We're experts in what we do. It's actually amplifying that expertise to really instill that confidence in someone who would look to use our products. And just to give a bit more detail on the content marketing aspects, we're looking at top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, bottom of the funnel, which many of you have probably heard applied to the kind of lead generation aspects. But it's looking at creating shareable, valuable, relevant and interesting content to attract and retain clearly defined audiences. And that's something I mentioned at the start. It's very important that you define the audience that you're trying to interact with, and that you create the content, the campaigns that is going to engage them. So, top of the funnel, grab that attention, educate the audience in a specific question, need, challenge, or opportunity that's relevant without that hard sell. Middle of the funnel is that, consideration, positioning our solutions. So continuing that education piece, start positioning our technology as a potential solution amongst other useful bits of information that we might have that address the question, needs, challenges, or opportunities. And then bottom of the funnel, driving that person to reach out and get more information from us by becoming a marketing qualified lead. So it's focusing in a bit more as we gather that information as they go through the funnel. We're then in a better position to give them really strong benefit oriented information that will resonate. So that could be case studies, podcasts, webinars with our specialists and with our customers. So what's happened really in 2021? So in a challenging global market really since March last year, and I know that all industries are different. We're very, very fortunate to be in a strong position. I know many industries aren't, and I really feel really disappointed for the industries that aren't able to function during this period. But our actually it's our H1 results, not H2. Our first half results, which were up until the end of October, were the strongest in the history of our organisation. Now, that was quite a stunning stat to come out. We could see that our marketing qualified leads numbers were really significant, actually double the previous financial year. Our traffic and engagement were all up really significantly. And as I said there, our lead numbers were double the previous financial year. So it was quite a scary period to be in, as many of you will understand, during a period where you just didn't know how things would pan out. And for us, by us amplifying and accelerating our digital activity in particular, we've been able to really harness the opportunities. And even now, our new business revenue targets are ahead as we run up to the end of our financial year. So things are, still going really well. So what have we learned? For me, and I keep banging on about it, tailoring content and messaging even more to our target personas via all of our campaigns. And when I say all of our campaigns, I mean everything. We need to be very relevant in what we're doing, and also understanding more about our customers. Looking at those lookalike audiences. We have a customer council that we engage with regularly about messages and our solutions and etc. So it's understanding even more about our customers to help us target our prospects better, because we know what benefits that our products and solutions can bring them. External events, no longer a core part of our activity, and that budget has pretty much been shifted entirely to digital. Has that been successful? Yes, it has. It's been really successful, which has been great. And constant monitoring of our key metrics. You know, I'm on our dashboards probably every half hour, looking to see where we are, what channels are up, what channels are down. You know, and importantly, because it's digital and why I love it, you can tweak, you can change things. Digital focus and recruitment of talent has paid dividends. You know, I've recruited a lot of people during this lockdown period, people that I've never met, but you know, yet it's all on Zoom. But that really has paid dividends, getting the right people with the right skills in. And our marketing approach, you know, it is driven by data, and people talk about that all the time, data-driven, it absolutely is. You know, it's looking at the data that's relevant to you as an organisation. There's so much data out there. It's actually distilling that down to say, what are the key metrics that I need to understand on a daily and on a monthly basis that are going to help us to optimise our activity even more. Test and learn, again, throughout my career is something that's really important. We're lucky that we're able to test, you know, on an ongoing basis, you know, whether it's testing landing pages, messaging, content pieces, new territories, whatever it may be, test and learn from that. And I've said that lockdown isn't that bad, and I mean that from my experience of working in this organisation. It has been a challenging time, but in terms of my teams, I really do think that they have, you know, they've gone above and beyond what I, even in my wildest dreams, would have expected. Everyone works really hard, but they really have pushed the boat out, you know, working at home in that environment, and I'm really, really proud of that. So when I say lockdown isn't that bad, I know it's been horrendous for a lot of industries. From our perspective, everyone has really come together and probably grown a lot closer, even though they're not physically in the same room. I think there's been much more collaboration, probably, working across lots of different offices than maybe there would have been. So, you know, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Marketing. It's, you know, huge benefits for me. If you told me when I was 22, when I was looking at CIM qualifications, that I'd be a fellow one day, I would have been quite surprised. So I'm really, really happy to be in that position. And if anyone, you know, watching would like to take advantage of any of the webinars, there's a really excellent Webinar Express sessions which is open to non-members, and there's a lot of events there as well open to non-members. So that's our Twitter handle there, and you can go online and CIM to find out more about all the great work that's going on, not only across the UK but specifically in Scotland. So yeah, thanks for listening today, and I hope you have a good rest of your day at this event.
Vivian, thank you very much for that. A lot of information contained within that. So we're getting questions coming in right down at the bottom again. If you've got anything you want to ask about, just stick it down in the question section at the bottom, and there will be a Q&A session shortly after our third speaker, who is Dr. Christine Bailey, author and Chief Marketing Officer for Valitor. Again, wants to talk round, but I think it's a fairly self-evident truth. If you cannot get customers physically through your door, you have to use digital channels to stay connected. So, Christine, over to you. Thank you. Christine, we've got no sound.
Okay.
There we go.
There we go. Okay, I will just go back and say, so my specialist subject is customer insights. Published a book on that last November. A passion of mine. We've heard a lot about how important data is in the current world. And let's face it, we were already living in a digitally connected world, but COVID has massively accelerated that. We've heard that 65% of the world's population is now online. We know that most people are accessing the internet via a mobile phone. I'm sure none of us have been on public transport recently, but if we were, it would look more like the picture on the right than the picture on the left. and more than half of the world's population are using social media. So what is this doing? It's creating a phenomenal amount of data. And I don't know if you're familiar with this infographic from Domo, which is called Data Never Sleeps. They've been doing this every year. They published the 8th one last August. And these are mind-blowing statistics of what happens online every single minute around the world. And they identified 3 differences that had happened as a result of the pandemic, which was the first one was that the future of work is at home for now. So we've gone from 15% of people working from home to over 50%. It may even be higher since past August. The second one is FaceTime. So we're doing events like this. We're using Zoom and we're using Teams, and that's just become the norm, hasn't it? So a massive increase in the amount of data created through those video conferences and catching up with friends over WhatsApp, a 51% increase in WhatsApp video. And the third one is curling up with quarantine. And this is about the amount of streaming services that we're all using. I don't know about you, but most of the Facebook posts from my friends these days seem to be recommendations about what to watch next on Netflix. So all of this data, masses of data is being collected. What does that mean for us in terms of marketing technology? I'm sure, given the nature of the conference, that you're all familiar with Scott Brinker's MarTech landscape, something that he does every year as well. And the last one that he published last April identified 8,000 different MarTech solutions. I'm quite sure, well, I'm not sure who's used the most of those, but certainly not 8,000 of them. But no surprise to me, data is the fastest growing category. So that was like 65.5% was data. So yeah, we're drowning in data. But I guess the good news is that not all of these tools are expensive, and you can get a lot of good analytics tools for free even. So really there's absolutely no excuse, not to be using some kind of data to support you with your analytics. And why do we need data? Well, data creates certainty, doesn't it? And we're living in a very uncertain world at the moment. And we've been conditioned to believe that the more points of evidence we have, the more likely we are to convince people, even if we've made up those facts like this person in my slide. But joking aside, where do we start? What are our different sources of data? And I published a doctorate on this subject in 2008, and back then I identified 5 different sources of data, which are competitors, customers, markets, employees, and channel partners. And actually, when I came to writing the book, I found that those 5 sources hadn't changed, but there were some key differences. Massive difference in the customer data. And that's because 2/3 of the buying journey now happens online. So we heard a lot about that from Vivian in the last presentation. And that means there are now enormous volumes of digital footprint data that we need to analyze. The second is we're talking now, aren't we? So you've got 400 million people talking to Siri. You've got 500 million talking to Google Assistant. And that means that the world of typing and reading is transitioning to a world that's about speaking and listening. And how do we take into account that data coming from speaking and listening? I'm sure you've all been surprised where you've had a conversation with someone and you think no one's listening, and then suddenly up pops a recommendation for the very thing you've been talking about in Facebook. And the third one is artificial intelligence. So lots of AI and machine learning being used now in more and more in marketing. Okay, so how are we going to turn this data into customer insights? So I think there's 4 different types of insights that we're predominantly using in our organizations, and not just for marketing, right across every single discipline, but obviously today we're talking about marketing. But those are market predictions, customer segments, propensity models, and customer analytics. So today I thought I'd focus just on, in the interest of time, 4 main areas where we use analytics in marketing. So to create a mission statement with purpose and a value proposition that matters to customers, to create segments and personas for content and thought leadership, and obviously to generate demand. So let's have a look at the first one, the mission statement and the value proposition. I'm a huge fan of Simon Sinek, and he's done a brilliant TED Talk called Finding Your Why, because companies are very good at describing what they do and how they do it. but they're really bad generally at explaining why they do it. So do you have a mission statement with purpose? When I joined Valitor, we had a mission statement that said, we want to be an international payment solutions company. I said, we already are an international payment solutions company. That's not a mission. That's not a purpose. The purpose needs to matter to people. So we did primary research, and it turns out that nobody cares about payments. Who knew? But they do care about buying and selling. So we changed our purpose to be making Valitor makes buying and selling easy. And that's something that is much more purposeful, and we still have that in place today. And why is that? Why are we good at saying what we do and how we do it, but not why? Is because we forget about the stories that we need to tell to bring the brand to life. Because here's the thing, nobody cares about data points. People can't remember them. It's stories that influence data more than anything. And Philip Pullman very famously said, after nourishment, shelter, and companionship, stories are the thing that we need most in the world. And who's a Game of Thrones fans? Definitely me. In the last scene in the final, he says he asks a rhetorical question: what moves people? And he says, "There's nothing in the world more powerful than a good story." He said, "What unites people? There's nothing in the world more powerful than a good story. Nothing can stop it. No enemy can defeat it." But not everybody wants to hear the same story, and not everybody will react in the same way to the story. So telling the right stories using data and analytics is just as important as being able to tell stories at all. Okay, let's have a look at the next one. Segments and personas. And I believe that you cannot create segments without data and analytics now, because the days of spray and pray marketing really are long gone. So I see the segmentation journey as a 5-step journey. First of all, you need to do your research, really understand your segment, the pain points, live in the shoes and the lives of the people that you're trying to reach, talk in their language. And then there's always a person, isn't there, at the end of your marketing, whether it's B2B or B2C. So bring your segments to life with personas. Then select your target accounts. Find out how your accounts are behaving using intent data, particularly digital intent data, and then target them with relevant digital advertising and serve them up with the relevant content that's going to move them on to the next stage of their buyer journey. And this is often referred to as account-based marketing, or ABM. And this is not something just for big companies. There really is an ABM program or an ABM budget for any size of organization. So whether you're doing one-to-one or one-to-few or one-to-many, everybody could and should be using account-based marketing. But let's have a little bit of fun now and think about what are some of the perils of segmentation. So what happens if we just use social demographics when we're describing people? Are we going to get our segmentation right? So let's take social demographic twins, 2 men, born in 1948, grew up in the UK, divorced and remarried, 2 grown-up sons, very wealthy, like skiing in the Alps and world famous. So can we think who these 2 people might be who are social demographic twins? Well, people often get the first one. Feel free to put it in the chat window if you get it, but not so often the second one. But I'm going to put you out of your misery. The first one is Prince Charles. Did you get that? Give yourself a pat on the back if you did. People don't often get the second one, but here is Prince Charles's social demographic twin, Ozzy Osbourne. And they have actually met each other. So be careful when you're doing your segmentation that you get it right and don't just use descriptive attributes. Okay, I'll continue my whistle-stop tour into content and thought leadership. Now, this is a huge tool. You can really punch above your weight. You don't have to be a market leader to be a thought leader. So everybody can use content and thought leadership to punch above your weight. And there's 2 major ways in which you should be using customer insights. The first one is to understand what content you want to create. Again, it's always about your audience. It's never about you. So create the content that your audience wants to see, not what you want to say. So build out a map of your buyer's journey and understand that you're going to need to serve up different types of content. We talked about that in the previous presentation. Different stages in the funnel, you will need different types of content at different stages. So use your insights and data to understand what you need to serve up at different stages of the journey. And then secondly, to assess how your content is performing. Now, honesty time, who's really bad at taking down old content? It could be a fantastically performing piece of content, but it's past its sell-by date. So for goodness sake, clean up, keep cleaning up, and keep refreshing your content. Okay, the last one, lead generation. Now, this is a massive area, and you could write a whole book just on this topic. But I think the important thing here is, especially because we're not face-to-face anymore, you need to use your data to understand how people are behaving, not actually what they're saying they're doing and how they're answering in polls. I love this little graphic, do as I say, don't do as I do. So, it's important to understand how people are behaving and not just what they're saying they're doing. And I think there's four key trends in four game changers in customer acquisition. One is the intent-based analytics that we've talked about, particularly digitally in intent-based analytics. The next one is the sophistication of next best action. Cisco in particular is very good at this. So it's combining lots of different data sources, and then to take a view of, based on past behavior and predictions about future behavior, what's the next best action to take with that particular customer? So depending where they are on their journey or their wants and their needs, where they are in their buying cycle, because we know that a tiny percentage of people are actually ready to buy at any one moment. So how do you find those people that are that point when they're ready to buy and serve them up with the right content? The third one is biometrics, so things like galvanic skin responses, eye movements, really understanding, okay, where are people looking on your website, but more importantly, where are they clicking? And are people taking the journeys that you expect them to? I know companies that sit behind a glass screen and set people simple tasks, and the route that people take through their website is quite different to the route that companies think they should take. So increase in biometrics. And the last one is SEO. And we've talked about that, not just for keywords and tagging, but really about optimized content. Okay, so let's make it a little bit more lighthearted. What could possibly go wrong when you're using your data and analytics? Well, the first one is where you lose your common sense. Now, hands up, I'm guilty of this one. You follow your sat-nav, even though intuitively, I did it as recently as last weekend, and I kicked myself for doing that because I knew the way, but I followed the sat-nav. And so if your data is telling you something that you really don't expect and is against your intuition, for goodness sake, ask some more questions. Don't just blindly follow the data. Remember, often the models and the algorithms are only as good as the way that they've been built or the information that's been put into them. The next one is where we get the wrong attribution. And this is where the machine will learn about what the information that you give it. And a really fun way to demonstrate how this works is to put some random things into Google and then see what kind of ads that Facebook serves you up. So before this presentation, I thought, okay, we'll have some fun with this. I said, what can I wear on a stag weekend? Doesn't know we're in lockdown, doesn't know I'm not a man. My name's Chris. So what can I wear on a stag weekend? Secondly, God, I speak for myself. God, we've all gone downhill a little bit, haven't we, during lockdown? So I need to look my best when we come out of lockdown, but, money's a bit tight. Can I have a cheap facelift? So what can I buy for a cheap facelift? And the last one, I'm dreaming of summer holidays. When can I go back on a summer holiday? I'd like a fun bum bag to wear on my summer holiday. So I put that into Google, closed down Google, went into Facebook, and Facebook absolutely delivered. These are the ads that I was served up. So wrong attribution can cause offense. You've bought a oversized jumper for your very large granny, and suddenly, you're being served up with plus size clothing or whatever it is. So be careful about the attribution. You can get it, but it can cause offense if you get it wrong. So let's end my whistle-stop tour with a quick recap. So COVID-19 has had a massive effect on the amount of data consumption in a world that was already digital, but that's just been accelerated through COVID. Data never sleeps. Just think of the amount of data, the infographic from Domo that's being produced every single minute online. And data comes from 5 main areas: customers, partners, channel partners, competitors. And there are 4 types of customer insight that's being generated from that data that we can use across every area of marketing. Now, it's not necessarily going to be easy. There's going to be numerous challenges along the way, so don't just blindly follow your data, and remember about the attribution and the danger of using social demographics when you're doing your segments. But the world is going to continue to come more digital, and we absolutely must be using insights across every area of marketing to understand our audiences and create remarkable marketing. Thank you for listening.
Christine, thank you very much for that. Sorry, we're having slight technical difficulty at our end. I absolutely sympathise with the sat-nav example. I've got a friend who once drove into a river. Quite literally drove into a river because he thought it was telling him to cross a ford. He was supposed to be in an A-class road at the time, so it does reveal a certain lack of intelligence on his part. Not many fords on A-class roads. Right, going to be a chance now to get through some of the questions and get some answers from our first 3 speakers. We are also featuring in this Stuart McMillan, who's head of multi-challenge at Taizo Group. So Stuart, can I just ask you, take a couple of minutes and just introduce yourself, tell me who you are and what you do. Okay, Stuart, for a start.
Yeah, so I'm the head of multi-channel at Taizo. I've been with Taizo for about 18 months. Taizo, for those that don't know, are an outdoor retailer, predominantly Scotland-based, with some large format stores. We cover everything from sort of walking, hiking, cycling, water sports, skiing, everything like that. Before that, I was at Shoe for 7 years as head of e-commerce optimization. I've worked in e-commerce for about 19 years, something like that. So I'm really a bit of an e-commerce generalist. There's a whole list of things that I'm not an expert in. I'm not an expert in things like data and analytics, user experience, web performance, logistics, and yeah, a whole range of things that I do get involved in, but I wouldn't claim to be an expert in many of them, but certainly a bit long of tooth in e-commerce, and I've seen most problems and challenges and opportunities that are out there.
Okay, Stuart. Let me just check. I am on. Stuart, thank you very much for that. Nice and succinct. Right, I'm going to start going through some of the questions. This first one's aimed at Vivian, and this is from Andrew Girdwood from Leith. How is Vivian coping with the brackets likely death of cookies and the growing tracking challenges with changes like iOS 14? Vivian.
Yeah, that's a very good question. We were talking about this the other day. I think that from our side, what we are looking at is, I mentioned some of the automation tools that we use, and Pardot in particular allows us to build a picture and allocate. You can allocate an engagement score using that tool. So all of our forms, all of the tracking is across our site. So when someone comes to our site, we are able to build up a picture and they get allocated a score based on what they engage with. So we have rules, for example, if someone has an engagement score of 150 or over, but they've not converted yet as an MQL, then they go into what's called a demand queue, and our business development guys will kind of look at that. So from a site perspective, we've got that covered. I think in terms of driving people to the site, I think that it hasn't been too problematic so far. I think what it's encouraged us to do is really just drill into all of our channels, probably more, and really just understand any trends. I mean, there's probably a couple of channels that we've maybe cut back on because we're not seeing the results that we used to get from them. And I think that might have something to do with that. So what we're trying to do is just really optimize our activity based on what we can control and we can manage. So yeah, it's had an impact, but I wouldn't say a huge impact at the moment, certainly from a B2B perspective.
How about your line of work, Stuart? Because I must confess, I am utterly sick of little things coming up saying, we really value your privacy. Oh, yeah?
we really value your data.
Absolutely do.
It's tricky, isn't it? That yeah, and I mean, there's news stories all the time around, the tracking and yeah, the general public being unaware of the tracking that is done upon them. But I mean, the genie's out of the bottle. We're all addicted to our data and this idea of we can exactly track where, what money we've spent, the return on that investment, where we could spend more money, where we could spend less money, and the whole sort of performance marketing piece. But I mean, for the size of Tizo, it's not been a massive issue yet, but I would concur with what Vivian says. It's really, the practical solution is around machine learning and things like A/B testing and things like that. It just makes the marketing job, I would say it actually makes the marketing job more opaque than it ever was, where with a cookie, you could kind of clearly see kind of cause and effect, if you like. Well, in many cases, you could see cause and effect. Whereas now there is a degree of guessing and propensity and it's statistically driven or machine learning driven, where we can say, well, we don't exactly know how it works, but when we tweak this bit here, things seem to get better. What means, and effectively what that means is it's going to pour more money into Google and other big platforms, because we're all going to want to make sure that we're still making the revenue, but we can't exactly track it. But we're still going to want to be able to measure what customers are doing. So, we're doing modeling on customers, and I'm not sure that is better for the customers. There's all these machine learning models going on about customers, and maybe it'd be better to be more transparent, but customers don't care. Customers don't care about the tracking element. They're just, like you say, Mark, annoyed by the pop-ups. And if there weren't the pop-ups and there were the tracking, I think 95% of customers would be happier.
Is that true, Christine, that the customers don't care about the tracking?
Well, do you know what? There's quite a generational divide on this one. And you find that the younger generation are less concerned about giving up their data because they understand the quid pro quo. They expect to see a personalized offer, and they're more willing to invest in that value exchange. I'll give up my data because I know I'll get a better offer back. So I think I've seen a lot of data where it really varies. That's probably the biggest difference between age as to whether people are, willing to give up their data or not.
Yeah, well, I'm not the younger age group, and it really annoys the hell out of me, truth to be told. Peter, any thoughts on that?
I think you should just turn the lens around and look at it from the point of view of the consumer. From my point of view, I would rather get, relevant information served to me that gives me what I'm interested in, instead of just random noise. And, accepting cookies and sharing, what you're interested in actually delivers relevance to me rather than just noise. So there's two sides to every argument, I think, Mark. And, the one is, you're going to get marketed to anyway, right? If you actually look at how many times we're marketed today, it's in the tens of thousands each day. So why not try and kind of put a filter around that and actually make relevance for yourself?
I can see your point, but on the other hand, it is a recipe for more of the same. Customers who bought this were also interested in buying that.
I think it's more sophisticated than that. I think, there are so many thousands and thousands of attributes. I don't think that you get more of the same. I mean, like Netflix does this brilliantly, doesn't it, of making recommendations. I would rather have that than have something completely irrelevant.
Yeah, and I think the whole GDPR guidelines, that this had been going on for a long time, where in digital channels we've been trying to target based on, what we felt people wanted to find out about, and GDPR really just shone a light and went, look at all of this that is being captured every day, and everyone went, oh my goodness, that's terrible, I'm going to switch off my cookies. I don't think it's a mass outrage issue. I think you're absolutely right, Christine, on the fact that people know that they will expect a much more targeted approach if they actually just do what they've always been doing and allow that data capture. I don't think there's anything wrong with highlighting that it's going on, but I think it caused a bit of a a kind of uproar and drama in a lot of the media, whereas actually it's been going on for years and years and years and years across every single kind of platform.
Peter, you told a story about the guy saying this diabetes drug is making me fat and I'm fine. The manufacturer said no. They got a dietitian and looked at it and it was actually what he was eating. Inevitably, There's going to be people who learn to work that system, and there's a very fine line between appeasement and actually being coerced as a manufacturer. Basically, somebody's going to start making money off you as a manufacturer when they figure out where your pressure point is.
Okay, I'm going to think about this one. but I mean, if it's up to you to decide how you engage, right? You can actually, I think people are sophisticated enough to kind of identify the bullshitters relatively early on in a conversation, and there's a difference between, giving feedback and being a troll, and I think you can kind of work that out quite quickly. So, if you've got, and also this person was known, right? He was actually a well-known blogger in this space. So, you've got to decide who you listen to and who you don't, right? Yeah. Somebody's opinion's only valuable if you find the opinion valuable, right? If somebody says to me, I don't like you particularly very much and I don't like that person, it doesn't make a lot of difference to my life, right? But if my kind of mother said to me, I don't like you very much, I'd probably have a good look at myself, So, it's all about relevance.
I agree on Trustpilot. If somebody gives me a bad score on Trustpilot, the first thing I do is go and see if they have a history of it. Have they, every review they've posted, has it been a terrible one, or have they been very glowing about other people and just, got a problem with me? Then I'm more likely to take that very seriously.
Question coming in here. I'll put it to you for a start, Stuart. How do you expect purpose-based marketing to evolve post-pandemic?
Well, what I would say is, certainly, looking at my experience in the past year, the market for us has significantly changed. I think there's been a lot of sort of sea change in attitudes towards how people spend leisure time and things like that. We don't know how the tide will turn in, give it another year. There's been a massive boom in people spending time outdoors and just walking for health because they can't go to gyms or things like that. Who knows what the rebound of that's going to be? But in terms of a meaningful marketing conversation with those people, there's a whole new opportunity out there to talk to a whole new sort of range of people and a lot of people who are shopping online who would never have historically shopped online. So, there are whole new cohorts of customers being added into sort of the mix of internet shoppers, and it's an exciting time to be in digital, and a great opportunity, and you just need to you need to understand those new cohorts. So for us, these people are quite different to the audience that we had, sort of in the status quo ante, but it's an interesting challenge, and I think it's one we welcome, and I think many companies have seen these changes. I've got really interesting time to engage these customers and keep the conversation going.
You're nodding.
I think there's a much more heightened interest in the conscience of companies, and people wanting to shop from companies where they feel that sense of purpose or alignment with the company's values, whether that's, from an equality perspective, whether it's from an environmental perspective. And, you've even got these terms now growing up, getting into the Oxford Dictionary, trust washing and woke washing, that comes because people have a much greater conscience. So I think probably even the pandemic has made people even more conscious of buying from companies that they think has got a moral compass, and they look at how companies have treated their employees, during the pandemic. And of course, not everybody, a lot of people are just buy the cheapest. There's always going to be the people that will be driven by price. But I would say there's a great rise of the conscious consumer.
Yeah, I was going to say that our brand, so our product brands are more well known than our PLC brand, and that's because we grow by a lot of acquisition activity. So we will acquire products and solutions, at least 4 usually a year, new businesses that come into our fold. So the brand recognition for some of our products, like Q-Pulse or Coruscant, for example, it's much better known than the IdeaGen brand. And I think over the next 2 years, we've been looking at the why. We've actually been looking at that just before the pandemic. There's a really good book by, it'll come to me now and I'll feed it back, but it's all about the why of the organization. So what we will be doing is looking at, actually amplifying what our brand is actually all about. And then over the next few years, you'll probably see that our product brands aren't as front and center, and it's more about the solutions that we bring as IdeaGen, So yeah, it's really important to look at the why, and it is challenging when we've got products that are better known than our actual main organization brand. So it's really important.
Simon Sinek's got.
You, Christine. Sorry.
I was just going to say Simon Sinek's got a really good TED talk. Yeah, Finding Your Why at School. Very good.
Really good. Yeah.
And you're seeing it leaking into other industries, right? You're seeing a big push towards, sustainable finance, and companies that are putting together, investment packs that are all about kind of ecologically sound solutions, etc. And that's something we've tried to do here. We've been carbon neutral for several years, and it's that kind of thing. It's living your brand. I think it's important. Don't just say it. It's right down to training of staff. 1/3 of our staff are trained in, St John's Ambulance mental health first aid. I think it's actually a quarter now because we've hired so many people during lockdown. It's about a quarter now is trained up. So it's all about kind of, I think, kindness, compassion, fairness are all things that are going to come out of this pandemic that, if you don't engage with that, then you're going to come unstuck. You've seen some pretty senior people leaving organizations by not showing those values in the last couple of weeks. And I think we're going to see more of it. It's going to get right down to people who have been claiming furlough when they didn't need it. That kind of thing is going to become very, very negative. And I've seen some great examples of companies like, say, Burness Paul giving the money back because they actually did furlough people. They found they were very busy. And then they gave the money back again because actually they didn't, they were making as much revenue as before. Dunelm's done it. A lot of the retailers have done it. So I think that kind of thing is going to be super important coming out of this pandemic.
Inevitably, there's going to be folk who are going to try and say, right, okay, I can superimpose some of these values onto who and what you are. And it's going to be done with a variable level of success, I would imagine. But I'm conscious of adverts changing, week to week at the moment. So, television adverts, where they've experimented with a particular scenario that, they've obviously checked it out with the consumer. They don't particularly like it, so they change the voiceover. I've got the kind of brain, I've watched an advert a couple of times and I could more or less do it word for word. And you see things changing really quite considerably. And my reaction to that is you never believed that in the first place. That the audience is maybe not sitting there taking it to pieces forensically, but they know there's something hokey about it.
That's always been the case with advertising, though, isn't it? That people create variations and see what is the most. But
I was going to say, I think as Peter said, it's coming out of this pandemic. I think there's much more of a focus on trust and compassion, and organisations and brand being actually real. So living the values and showing consumers that they are living their values, because you can tell straight away when there's people, there's massive organisations destroying rainforests, but they're investing in some green thing to try and divert that kind of away from that. So I think that certainly following the pandemic, I think there's going to be much more focus on actually are you real and what you're actually seeing as a brand. So that might be more challenging for the ones that maybe aren't as real, but for the ones that are, I think it'll be quite a good opportunity to really show that they are.
But how do you identify yourself as being real, close inverted commas?
Just live it.
I think one example is a little bit old, but one of the Kardashian family, one of the Kylie Jenner, and she was in a Diet Pepsi ad, and it was in the middle of a police riot, and she kind of drank the can of Diet Pepsi, and this stopped the riot, and they got absolutely savage for that because it was just so inauthentic. So you get found out.
Yeah, it's quite easy to spot, I think, to be honest. Yeah, I remember that. I'd forgotten all about that, Kristen.
A couple of comments in here from Benjamin McEwen from Plasma Security. He says customers do care about tracking. Forced opt-in to cookies is something under scrutiny. And he also says younger people are more cautious and wary. It's actually the opposite of what was described before. Discuss.
Yeah, maybe different data points, but the data I've seen says the opposite to that. But
it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing how much information is actually out there. I don't know if anyone watched the television program where the journalist went and asked for all her records, and she was literally in tears, and she was given a portfolio that was literally about a foot thick because she demanded all her data. And she was disgusted that all of the big companies knew where she'd been on holiday, who her boyfriends were, who her friends were, what she spent, kind of what her salary was. You know, this, even if it's anonymous and they didn't know who she was, they knew exactly what she was and everything about her. Yeah. You know, so, sorry, and that's for the people sharing stuff.
Yeah, and I think things like Facebook, where, you know, and other channels where it's, honestly, share this brand new Range Rover and we'll announce a winner, right? Anyone with a brain, if you go into the actual page and you look at the history, it's not an official page and it was set up 2 hours ago. So people don't understand enough about what it is they're actually doing. You know, and in Facebook, you know, I'm set to private because I only want my friends to know anything about me. People go in and actually don't understand. You know, they set everything to public and then don't understand why everyone has access to data. I think there is generally an education thing going on. It's easy to scare people about cookies, but actually have a little look at what you're doing every day, and do you understand what you're doing? You know, and from my perspective, from a day-to-day aspect, you know, we have only seen our numbers go up because, as Christine was pointing out, it's all about, you know, really targeted, looking at those personas and giving them really relevant content. And I think for B2B, it's maybe a little bit different. B2C is probably a bit of a different kettle of fish here, but people need to understand what it is they're actually pushing out there first, before moaning about how everyone can access all their information. If everything's set to public, you know, you have a problem.
But I mean, there's such a, it's such a complex field that to expect your average Joe public to be able to digest much of this at all, I think is actually, we're probably kind of kidding ourselves. I mean, my mother-in-law, she wouldn't dare use like digital banking. She doesn't trust it, but she would click on anything that's in an email. You know, and she's just one of many who will be in a very similar story around just, you know, we live and breathe this, but we've, you know, cumulatively decades of experience and all the sort of ins and outs of this, but nobody reads privacy policies. Nobody reads the, you know, the information's on websites. Nobody reads them, and even though GDPR wanted to make that simple, most people, 99.9% of people will just scroll to the bottom and click I accept. So I don't know what the solution is, but certainly I don't even know if there is a solution, to be honest.
This is what I was talking about earlier on when I was doing my presentation with Sir Tim Berners-Lee around about For the Web. It's all about, you know, getting governments and agencies to sign up and companies to sign up around about a set of criteria to try and make the web a more safe, you know, hospitable place, and forcing people like Facebook and Google and, you know, companies like Instagram, Twitter, etc., to actually be more accountable. Yeah, when I worked, I was quite lucky enough to be in a reasonably senior job in Microsoft when somebody tried to groom my 14-year-old son on Xbox Live, and my son actually came and said that this guy was being very weird with him. So I kind of played as my son, and I very quickly went to our head of security, who was 25 years in the FBI, called Ed Gibson, who was nicknamed Ed the Fed, and I handed it all over to Ed, and they tracked him down. And ultimately ended up getting jailed for what he was doing online. But you know what that shows is that you're letting strangers into your house. You know, one of the things, you know, I've got with regards to, you know, the mesh when my kids were young, kids settings and adult settings, and control access to the web right down to the kids, because you're basically opening the front door and letting people in. And you need, I'm a great believer when it comes to this stuff around about security is the paranoid survive, so just make sure you keep that going. My next door neighbor, our houses are pretty far apart, but, he had kind of reasonable enough network. His new telly kept on connected to my network, and he had an open, or I kept on, he had an open network, and my computer connected to his, sorry. And eventually I had to show him that I could see in his living room by switching on his camera of his TV to get him to put a password on his router, so it's that kind of things. And if we are struggling, imagine what our kind of, 75, 80-year-old parents are like. It is a very difficult, emotive thing.
Well, we all probably trust no one. We want everyone to trust everything.
Yeah.
For our jobs, isn't it?
Sorry, this has gone very negative. Sorry about this. Yeah.
No, I think we've probably managed to succeed in scaring the bejesus out of everybody now. So, listen, thank you very much for that. I'm sorry we didn't manage to get through all the questions, but Peter Proud, Vivian McLaren, Christine Bailey, and Stuart McMillan, thank you all for taking part this morning.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
We're going to take a 15-minute break now. The next session is going to starting at 11 o'clock. So take the opportunity, if you can, to visit the exhibition hall. There are some fantastic prizes available. Take the time to engage with the sponsors and speak with other delegates. But for the moment, thanks very much for joining us for this first session. Thank you.